Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? My name is Attorney Charles Zavala, your immigration lawyer. We are based here out of Houston, Texas, but we can help you no matter where you are in the USA or even if you're abroad. So today's video is going to be regarding a work permit, also called, or actually called an employment authorization document. And I'm gonna kind of compare it to what a work visa is, because sometimes people get those confused, right? So, okay, let me start from the beginning. There is something called a work visa, and then there's something called a employment authorization document. A lot of people call it a work permit. So those are two separate things. A work visa is a type of visa that allows you to enter the USA, and as part of that visa, and it can be, there's different type of work visas. There's H-1B, H-2B, there's TN, different type of visas that allow you to come in the country and work while you are here, right? And on that visa, it's gonna say for how long you can work for. You are only eligible for a work visa if you meet the criteria, right? Normally you need an employer to sponsor you. You need to have the qualifications. You have to go through that process and get approved. That is different than what a work permit or an EAD, employment authorization document, is. And I know sometimes people get on me, but I'm just going to say work permit or EAD. But really what it is called an employment authorization document. That is different from a work visa. So a work permit or an EAD is different. That is a piece of, kind of looks like an ID, like a driver's license that has your face on it. And ultimately, if you are here in the country and you fit one of the guidelines on where you can apply for an employment authorization document, remember, not a work visa, because if you have a work visa, you're allowed to be here in the country and work. An employment authorization document's a little bit different. So with an employment authorization document, you have to apply, and the form is called an I-765. And what it is it's just a form, just like anything else with immigration. You fill it out, your information. They want to know all your biographical information, blah, 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 blah. But there's also a question there that's going to say, what is your eligibility category? Because remember, not anyone could work in the USA. Let's pretend I'm from another country. Sorry, I was looking for my daughter's giraffe. I usually use that as an example. But let's pretend I'm from another country and I come into the USA as a tourist, right? I can't start working in the USA. My visa, that of a tourist, does not allow me to work in the USA. So if I want to apply for an employment authorization document, I can, but chances are going to be rejected. And the reason why is because when you apply for that I-765 employment authorization document, there's a part that says, what is your eligibility category? And it's going to be a number and a letter, but don't worry about that part. But ultimately, you have to let USCIS know under what category you are eligible, because not everybody's eligible. The government has to give you permission to work here. And that can be various things. That could be if you're here based on what's called asylum. That could be here if you're getting your green card through marriage. That could be here if you're here on temporary protected status. There's different ways one can get employment authorization document, but not everybody can get them, right? So that's the difference between a work visa and an employment authorization document. But still, let's fast forward. Let's say we do get an or we're eligible to apply for an employment authorization document. A lot of the people will see in the news, and this is kind of misinformation, but a lot of people will say, oh, I see all these undocumented people coming to the USA and they're giving them all these work visas and all that stuff. That's not true. What's actually happening is a lot of people are coming into this country undocumented and they're applying for what's called asylum, right? And the rules for asylum say, if you apply for asylum 150 days after the moment you filed your asylum application, you're eligible to apply for an employment authorization document. And people will say, well, why is that? You know, if these people are here undocumented, why are they allowed to work? Because the reality is, what's the other option? They're here, they're applying for asylum, and they're not allowed to work? Are they just going to sit here and do nothing for potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years while their case is pending? No, that doesn't make sense, right? So they are eligible to apply for the EAD category, and I think it's C8 for asylum. So that's what they're able to get through that. So now the question is, well, how long does that take? So let's pretend you file for it. You know what? Usually between 2 to 4 months, you should be able to get it. And the way the process works is this. You file your I-765, you pay your filing fee depending on what category you are. Some categories, yes, some categories, no. Asylum, you do not have to pay for your initial employment authorization document. You file it. Boom, you send everything. You will then receive what's called an I-797C receipt from USCIS telling you, we received your application. That's it. They don't tell you anything else. They just say, we received it and it's processing. And then a few weeks later, you're going to get another document that's going to be for your fingerprints. So you're going to have to show up to an appointment. They're going to take your fingerprints, quick in and out, boom, you're done. After that, you should be able to receive your employment authorization document. The EAD is going to be valid for X amount of years, depending on what category you applied for, right? So once that gets close to expiring, you are able to renew it a few months prior to it expiring, which I always recommend to do beforehand because you don't want to be caught without it, right? So that is the biggest difference between a work visa and a slang work permit, right? A work visa actually allows you to enter the USA, leave the USA, enter the USA, leave the USA. The government has given you permission to live in the USA temporarily and to work. That is a work visa, and you have to find out which category you can apply for. A work permit or an employment authorization document is a separate thing where you have to actually apply for that from within the USA, and the government has to give you permission based on the category you applied for. So remember, not everyone applies for a work visa and not everyone is eligible for an employment authorization document. So we have to figure out if you are eligible, because a lot of times I'll get calls from people who say, look, I'm here in this country, I'm documented, can I get a work permit or an EAD? And I tell them, just on that on itself, no, because the government's going to say, well, I'm not going to let you work here if you're here undocumented, unless you've applied for asylum or you've got some other pending process that the law will justify, right? So that's a very important distinction, y'all. I get a lot of questions regarding this. So that's it's called the form I-765. You have to file that. You have to file evidence. There's a few things you have to do with it. But ultimately, that is the way someone can get their employment authorization document if they have the right to do so in the USA. Okay. If you guys need help or you need help with work visas or EADs, feel free to give us a call. My name is Attorney Charles Zavala. I'm more than happy to help you with anything you can. Phone number's right here on the screen. Thank you. I hope you all have an absolutely beautiful day. Bye-bye.